Hello, science enthusiasts. Welcome to Spaces Unleashed. It's Science Chat. Our guest tonight is the amazing Dr. Laci Brock, who is a planetary scientist, an artist, and fellow video gamer. So we're going to have an amazing chat with her. You'll learn about what she studies, these amazing objects called Brown Dwarfs. And then we'll open up the floor to questions from the audience. So without further ado, Dr. Brock, how are you tonight?
Hello, I am good. How are you?
I'm so good. Now, spoiler alert, we talked earlier today. So this is conversation. This is conversation number 2. And I had so much fun. I learned so much and I got to connect with another person who plays video games. So this is great. Dr. Brock, could you tell everybody a little bit about your education? Like you have a doctorate, you are a planetary scientist, but what's your education?
Sure. I just finished my PhD in December in planetary sciences, but I started as an undergraduate student studying atmospheric sciences. I originally wanted to do something with severe weather, tornadoes, something along those lines. And even though I always loved space, I couldn't decide, and I didn't know that planetary sciences existed because it wasn't actually a major at my school at the time. I wanted to combine my love of weather with my love of space, but it wasn't until I think my sophomore year during undergraduate that I learned we had just gotten faculty at Purdue University who studied planetary sciences. And I realized that planetary sciences was the thing I wanted to do. It was connecting geology, atmospheric science, physics, astronomy, all into one to study planets in the solar system or exoplanets, moons, asteroids. And so I switched my major to interdisciplinary physics because, like I said, planetary sciences wasn't available yet. And I graduated with interdisciplinary physics, and then I went on to do my PhD in planetary sciences.
So were you a kid early on that liked science and space? Like, were you somebody that looked up at the night sky or got all the science books from the library and devoured them like candy?
Oh, yeah. I have the cliche nerd story. Ever since I was little, I grew up in rural Indiana, raised by my single dad with the help of my grandparents, and we didn't have a lot of money. So for entertainment, we didn't go on vacations. We didn't go anywhere. I would go outside and play, or we would go camping. And I grew up on a small farm, so I was always running around outside, looking at clouds, watching storms roll in, and I really loved space. And I think being out in nature is what really ignited that passion for me.
Were you like the precocious little kid that knew a bunch of space facts and you'd butt in adult conversations? I seem to remember that's what I did too.
Oh yeah, definitely. I'm sure I was annoying. I mean, pleasant. I'm sure I was pleasant. I remember in second grade, I got these books from the book fair through Book It, where you would eat pizza and then, you'd read books and you'd get free pizza. So that was awesome. And I would get books that were called What is Lightning? Why Does It Thunder? Different books about the solar system. And I also memorized a lot of roller coaster statistics for some reason, but I was definitely a nerd.
I kind of roller coaster statistics. I don't know if I'd like to be in line with a little kid that's just like rattling off a whole bunch of roller coaster statistics. It might cause some more anxiety. Might cause some anxiety.
Yeah, probably. I definitely loved science from a young age. I also really liked geology. I would just go in my driveway and sit there for hours and try to collect rocks with different shiny pieces in them and try to figure out what the rocks were.
Aww.
I really liked volcanoes. And so I loved physical science, but I didn't really know when I was younger what exactly I wanted to do. I just knew I wanted to be a scientist of some kind.
I love it. That's a great backstory. Now you're a scientist. Now you're Dr. Laci Brock, congratulations actually
I
on your
did it.
Yeah,
Thank you.
congratulations on your PhD. That is no small feat. In your
I'm very tired.
what's that, sorry?
I'm very tired.
Oh, it's a lot of work. My wife, she's the co-host, Chris, she did her master's and it was a ton of work.
It's so much work.
Yeah. Well, speaking of master's and PhD, after your undergrad, like you have to go and you have to do some research, right? You have to pick some kind of topic. What did you
Yes.
get? What did you get into? What was your research on?
During undergrad, I really wanted to study exoplanet atmospheres. There wasn't a faculty member at Purdue at the time who did planetary atmospheres. So my goal was to go on to graduate school and, do some atmosphere work.
Mm-hmm.
And when I first learned about these objects called brown dwarfs, I fell in love with them and I really wanted to study them.
Now, we were talking earlier today. I was so excited when you mentioned brown dwarfs. Because I haven't had a single guest on the Science Podcast or in Spaces that even mentioned the word brown dwarfs. And they're fascinating. And you know so much more than me. Like I know like the inside cover of a book versus the entire book kind of deal here. Could you tell everybody what a brown dwarf is?
I would love to.
Yay!
Yay! Oh my gosh, that's hilarious. I love brown dwarfs. They're fascinating. If you haven't heard of them, they're often referred to as failed stars in the media. But what they are substellar objects, meaning they're not stars. They're less massive than stars, but they're more massive than giant planets like Jupiter. They have properties of both stars and planets. And so I sort of describe them as the in-betweens, in between a planet and a star. They're not massive enough to fuse hydrogen into helium like a star does. And their atmospheres are not as hot as a star. So their atmospheres are cool enough for clouds to form. And I actually studied the clouds in brown dwarfs because that's part of understanding the atmospheric properties of these objects as a whole is to model and understand their clouds and compare the models that we get to telescope data.
So these are really far away. Like there's we don't have brown dwarfs in our solar system. They're far, far away. How do you do that, Doc? Like, could you walk us through how you model the clouds? Like that's fascinating.
Yeah, it's too bad we don't have any in our solar system. I think the closest one is about 6.5 light years away.
Oh, that's not bad. That's not bad considering.
Yeah, it's not too bad. Well, brown dwarfs are difficult to find because they're brightest in infrared wavelengths. So you can't really look up at the night sky and see a brown dwarf like you can a normal star. Because with our vision, they're just not very bright and visible light. And so you have to use infrared telescopes on the ground like Keck in Hawaii, or you have to go to space to get outside of our atmosphere. So you can study them with all sky surveys. Hubble, I actually use some Hubble data.
Oh, cool.
To study them. Yeah, so you have to use telescopes that are sensitive to infrared wavelengths.
Now, I'd imagine you're pretty excited about the Webb telescope because if memory serves, I've done a bunch of stories on the podcast about it. It uses infrared as one of its main things.
Yes, I am so excited. I think it will be able to teach us a lot more about brown dwarf atmospheres and exoplanet atmospheres too. So it's all very exciting.
Oh, wow. I think I've talked to so many different scientists who study things in space, and they're all they just can't wait for the first things to come in from the James Webb Space Telescope. So yeah, I'm waiting.
Yeah, it's so exciting.
Now, okay, so are the clouds that you study on these brown dwarf things substellar objects? Did I say that right? Substellar objects?
Yeah, and that just means not a star, smaller than a star.
Right. I kind of feel that it's a little. I kind of feel that it's negative to call them failed stars. Right? They're pretty cool.
Yeah, it's kind of mean. I do like it because it's less jargony than substellar, and I always want to make sure that I'm using words that anyone can understand.
That's right.
It is kind of mean, but it is what it is.
I guess we've all failed at something in life, so we understand that term. We haven't all been a substellar space object. So
yeah, maybe one of these days.
Okay, so what are the clouds made of on these brown dwarfs?
The clouds. Oh, wait, will I spoil my fun fact?
Oh, we're not doing the super fact in the same order. So you can go ahead and spoil it.
I can spoil it? Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, let me tell you, this is why, as soon as I heard about what was going on in brown dwarf atmospheres, this is why I wanted to study them, because I love the weather on Earth. I love to watch clouds and storms. And I learned that clouds on brown dwarfs are made of gemstones. They have gemstone clouds.
Like what kind of, okay, what?
I know. So basically, on Earth, you know that we have water vapor in the atmosphere, and that condenses to form clouds made of water. Pretty normal.
Yep.
Brown dwarfs are more massive than planets like Jupiter, and so they also have hotter temperatures and greater pressures than Jupiter. And those atmospheric properties will determine the type of material that can condense to form clouds in the atmosphere. And so on brown dwarfs, you end up with clouds that are made of materials like iron, silicates, quartz. And some of those silicates, on Earth, we know them as forsterite or instatite. And you may know the green gemstone called peridot. That's one of the materials that can form a cloud on a brown dwarf. There's also corundum in the atmosphere, and that's where rubies and sapphires come from.
That is insane. But these are all like, they're gases, right? They're like it's so hot they're a gas.
Yeah, exactly. Like on Earth, this would be a rock or a mineral in the Earth's atmosphere. But on brown dwarfs, it's hotter and the pressures are different. And so they're vapor. So you get iron vapor, silicate vapor.
And like our clouds are gaseous water and it gets cold, they rain. Does that happen on these brown dwarfs? Like, would you get pelted by a ruby? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, like if it hailed and it's, a solid piece, a ruby's going to land on your head. If it's raining and it's an iron cloud, well, there's going to be some liquid iron on you, which sounds like a great time.
I think you'd be dead though, wouldn't you? Wouldn't it be so hot?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay, all right.
Oh yeah, you're dead. You're dead.
If you scooped up the cloud, like you took a pail, and let's say you could survive, because obviously, remember, we just said you're dead, but let's say you're alive.
So you respawned.
You respawned.
Up the cloud.
That's right. Okay, so like, yeah, you've. That sounds like something from the game I'm playing, Elden Ring. You have died over and over and over again, but you just keep coming back. Let's say you scoop up this cloud. Would it be a mixture of all of these gaseous gemstone-y stuff? Like if you scooped it up and put it in the fridge, would you get a hodgepodge of gemstones? That's what I'm thinking of.
Yeah, it's possible. What we're learning with brown dwarfs, because it's still a very active area of research, is that the thermochemical models, or models that predict, the chemistry at different temperatures, the models will predict all of these different kinds of materials that can exist. And we get telescope observations, and we're trying to figure out exactly what types of clouds are present. And we're learning that they're probably in layers. And so maybe there's a deeper in the atmosphere, there's maybe the iron cloud deck. And then above that, maybe it's your silicate cloud layer. And, maybe higher up in the atmosphere, maybe it's even cool enough at the top of the atmosphere for water clouds. It depends on the individual atmospheric properties of the brown dwarf, but we do think a range of clouds in different layers is what we're observing.
That is banana. Is that just due to the density of iron? Like iron is more dense than silicate, or is there way more things at play? Like that's just my simple science-minded brain going here.
Yeah, that's on the right track because iron will condense at a different temperature than
Oh, okay.
maybe Instatite would. And so deeper in the atmosphere, the pressure is greater and the temperatures are warmer. And maybe that's the sweet spot where no more iron vapor, it will condense to, or no more iron in the gaseous state. It is now forming a cloud. And, maybe it's too hot for a silicate to condense in that area.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Yeah, so it's an active area of research, and when we get data back from James Webb, it'll be great because we can learn from longer wavelength observations in the infrared. We can learn more about the types of clouds, and maybe if one brown dwarf looks different from another because of the clouds and how that's impacting the spectrum of light that we're looking at.
Oh man, that is so fascinating.
I know, it's so cool.
I can see why you fell in love with these things. They're just bananas. Like, they're so wild. If you're just joining us, this is our science chat with Dr. Laci Brock, who's a planetary scientist and artist. We'll get to that in a second here. And we are chatting about brown dwarfs, which are absolutely wild. After the interview, we're going to open up the floor to questions. So I saw some people requesting, but you'll just have to hold on a second. I have one more question about brown dwarfs, Doc. And that's okay. They're the size of Jupiter, bigger, like they're bigger than Jupiter or more massive than Jupiter.
They are more massive than Jupiter. About what we consider a brown dwarf is usually about 13 times the mass of Jupiter. And that goes up to 80 times the mass of Jupiter. So on the lower end, that's sort of the planet brown dwarf cutoff. And at the higher end, that's the brown dwarf star cutoff.
Oh, wow.
And it's not a solid line, but what we use is, for stars, to be a star, you have to fuse hydrogen into helium. And brown dwarfs can't do that, but they can fuse deuterium sometimes early in their life.
Really? Deuterium?
Yeah, so they can fuse deuterium. And then the lower boundary, the planet brown dwarf boundary, you have to be about 13 times the mass of Jupiter to fuse deuterium. And these are just sort of, rules of thumb that we use to describe a brown dwarf. But it all depends on the composition too. They're mostly hydrogen and helium, like stars and giant planets. So those boundaries can move a little.
So my question is, like, if you those videos on YouTube where they show the size of planets and stars and they kind of zoom out. Have you seen those ones? I show them to my students and they go bananas. Like, they can't wrap their head around how big a star is next to the Earth. If you had Jupiter next to a medium-sized brown dwarf, is the brown dwarf like considerably bigger, or are they like roughly the same size, but there's just more mass in the brown dwarf? That was my question, I guess.
Oh yeah, that's the interesting thing is brown dwarfs are all about the same size as Jupiter.
Okay.
But they're much more massive.
Gotcha.
Now, and that's because brown dwarfs
go ahead.
will contract throughout their lifetime. So, they start off a little bigger, and then because they're not fusing and sustaining fusion in their core, they don't have any internal pressure to, push outward. So gravity wins and they shrink a little bit. And so they all end up being about the same size as Jupiter in radius.
That's interesting. Now, Jupiter has so many moons, and Saturn too, right? They're basically their own little solar system. Do we know if brown dwarfs have moons, or is their gravity big enough they've got planets around them? Like, I'm curious about that.
Yeah, I think that they could definitely have moons. We haven't detected any exomoons yet because that's just challenging technologically. But a brown dwarf could definitely have a moon. I study brown dwarfs in binary systems, so there's two of them. Something that's interesting as far as could a brown dwarf have a planet, There's the TRAPPIST-1 exoplanetary system. Have you heard of that?
Yep. Yeah, I have. There's
Okay.
a bunch of rocky planets was around a thing. You know more than me,
Yeah.
but I think I'm on the right track.
Yeah, the one that's always, 7 rocky Earth-like planets.
Oh, yeah.
The star in that system is a cool red dwarf star. And it's like right on the cutoff for a brown dwarf. It's almost a brown dwarf. And so we see these low mass stars that can have many rocky planets. And so brown dwarf could also have planets around it. I don't think we've discovered any brown dwarfs with large solar systems, but it's definitely possible.
Okay, gotcha. We just don't know yet, but it's possible.
Yeah, I've kind of been in my own world working on a paper, so maybe if something new came out, I'm not aware of it, but yeah, it's definitely possible.
I have a question about those TRAPPIST planets. Can I ask a question about that?
Yeah, I'll try my best.
Okay. I read that like people were very excited because they were rocky planets, and rocky planets means greater chance of life than big gas planets. But because they're around like this little teeny tiny star, a lot of the scientists were like, well, it's cool, but the chance of there being any life on those planets is kind of low just because the star it's around so small.
Yeah, the star that those planets orbit, a red dwarf star, they're also very active stars. And so they're flinging out solar flares, and that could be very detrimental to any atmospheres that those rocky planets have.
Oh, just like blow them away.
Yeah, it'll just vaporize their atmosphere. And so it's complicated because in the media you see, we found Earth 2.0. It's a rocky planet in the habitable zone. And that's just kind of blown out of proportion because, I mean, whoever picked habitable zone, the idea is that habitable zone means here liquid water could exist. And that's all that it means. And that gets tossed around a lot in the exoplanet atmosphere articles. And the real story is a lot of these planets we've detected are around these red dwarf stars. And, they're very active and they could just irradiate these atmospheres away.
Bad news for the critters that maybe have started growing on that planet.
I know. Yeah, it all depends. It all depends on the atmospheric composition and, maybe there's life underneath the surface. Maybe it evolved to just deal with the excess radiation. We don't know. There's a lot that we don't know yet.
That's true. It's just it's mind-boggling the amount of different ways that there could be on different worlds out there.
Yeah, it's really exciting and fun to think about.
I know. I stay up I sometimes can't get to sleep at night sometimes if my mind wanders to that.
I know. I get mad. Like, I was born too soon. I want to go to an exoplanet.
Too soon. Yeah. I've heard that before. Can we talk a little bit about your art?
Yes, I love to paint.
Right. So you paint and you paint planets and stellar objects. Can you talk a little bit about that? I'm going to throw some of your art up in the nest for people to look at.
Ooh, okay. Yes, I love to paint. I've been painting my whole life on and off as a hobby. I probably paint space art the most. I also like landscapes and nature, but it's mostly space art. I started painting when I was really, really young. I don't know, 4, and I mostly painted in acrylics growing up. And I got really busy when I started undergrad. I worked 3 jobs during undergrad, and I had some bad advice along the way where people told me that I couldn't do science and art. I couldn't be a scientist and an artist. And as a first generation student, I sort of listened to these people because I knew they had more experience and they knew more than I did about the world. And I really didn't have anyone to talk to about it. So I disconnected with art for a while. And then during my PhD program, I felt like I needed something, and I reignited my passion for painting, and I taught myself a couple new mediums to learn. And then I just started painting more regularly, and that's when I made my social media accounts, but I taught myself how to paint in spray paint first. And then I moved on to watercolors, oils, and I think digital art was my most recent one.
I put some of the stuff up in the nest. Did you make your is that you that made your stellar arts profile thing there? I have it up in the nest on the phone.
The Jupiter?
Yeah, no. It says spiced up my logo a bit as a signature watermark for my art. Space birds for the win.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's cute.
I did that. My page, people think that I can't spell stellar, but it's actually named after a bird. Stellar is J with an E. I was trying to be punny and make it like a space bird.
I feel your pain. You have no idea how many people DM Chris and I trying to tell us that we've spelt Bunsen burner wrong. They're like, you're like, why do you, it's Burner, Bunsen burner. I'm like, no, he's a Bernese mountain dog and that's short for burner. And I don't know. And then we have people that have been following us for years and they just make the connection. They're like, oh, it's a pun. So I imagine.
I get it.
Yeah, I imagine it's the same for folks that follow you. They're like, oh, okay, it's a bird.
The weirdest thing is people will call me Stella.
Oh,
and I'm okay. Like, but it says Laci right there. You're messaging me and it says my name and it's Laci.
Stella.
Not Stella. I mean, I hate to make fun of them. Like, sorry if you're out there and you've done that. I just laugh because I don't like, where are you getting that from?
It's all good. Yep. So your art is just for you, right? You don't sell your art. It's just a way to express your creativity.
It has been for most of my life, just a hobby, something that I would do because I enjoyed it or because I was a poor student and I wanted to give somebody a gift. I would just give them a painting. And I never shared my art with the world until I made a social media account. I started on Instagram first and I would just post my art. And I have sold a couple small watercolor paintings before. I tend to hoard all of my paintings. I haven't actually painted that many oil paintings, maybe 10, maybe 10 or 15, but I have them hanging up around my house. And I would like to eventually sell, but my big things are that I don't want it to become a source of stress to where it isn't fun anymore and it feels like a job. I don't want to lose that passion again. And I don't want to do commissions because I have anxiety and I would be really stressed out, trying to paint something for somebody. And if they're not happy and they don't want it, I think that's really stressful. So I think I'll eventually sell prints and then maybe I'll sell some originals. But it's a lot. I mean, I knew it was a lot of work to sell art and, to be an artist full-time or part-time. I knew that, but I started to look into selling art, but I realized I needed to finish my PhD and not get distracted or stressed out by other things. So I kind of just pushed it away.
Well, whenever you revisit it, if you start up again and you're selling some stuff, give our account a tag. We'll help spread the word.
Oh, awesome. I appreciate it. That's so kind. Yeah, I'm really awkward about my art still because, I painting for so long and only sharing art with people for like 4 years. I still am really awkward about sharing it, but I've slowly gotten more comfortable and used to it.
Well, speaking of sharing your art and your science, you do that on TikTok, right? You have 2 TikTok accounts. One is your science communication /art account, and the other is your video game account.
Yes. I cause a lot of shenanigans on TikTok. My main account is where I create planetary science and space art content. And I refuse to separate science and art. Ideally, in social media, you would have a science account and an art account, but my whole thing is showing that you can do science and art and they're very connected. So I refuse to separate those, even if the algorithm or people don't want to follow for that. I don't care. I'm going to stick with that. But I also game a lot and I realized that gaming was less interconnected than the science and art. So I eventually made a second account and I just post gaming clips there.
Very cool. I've watched some of your TikToks, like because Bunsen and Beaker have a TikTok that I just don't have time to really put much effort into, but I do look at things on TikTok. What games do you post on TikTok?
My gaming TikTok is all Apex Legends clips.
So that is okay. That's a first person shooter where you pick a person, a class, and they've got different abilities, and then you try and take out the other team, basically, I think.
Yeah, it's a battle royale first person shooter. So you try to be the last squad standing.
You mentioned you played Overwatch before that, and that's the game I have played. I haven't played Apex Legends. And when Overwatch came out, I'm so bad at those gun games where you have a gun. My son, Adam, he teases me because I have such terrible aim. I'm so bad. So when I played Overwatch, I found a character, the Reinhardt guy, the guy with the giant shield. That's his job, is you just press a button and a shield comes up in front of you and you protect your team. And I was like, this is for me. This is what I do. Like if I was a soldier in battle, I would get a giant door as a shield, and that's what I would use, and people could hide behind me. And that's the guy I played in that game. So anyways.
I love that. I am so bad at Reinhardt. I cannot play him whatsoever. I'm very good at aiming, and so I like to play. In Overwatch, I played Widowmaker. She was the sniper, and I was really good at her. And yeah, Overwatch is great. And then Apex came out, and I sort of got sucked into Apex, and I play that game all the time now. I still play other games if I'm just, trying to chill and relax. I really like Stardew Valley.
Oh, you know what? I got something for you.
For me?
Yeah. Here it comes. I don't know if you can hear that.
I'm already calmed and soothed just from hearing that.
It's the spring theme of Stardew Valley.
It's a great game. It's really fun to play on the Nintendo Switch and just travel and play it, or just sit on your couch and play it. It's so good.
Yeah. Chris knows I play that game quite a bit. It's a farming game, and it's just so relaxing. Like, you have a stressful day at the job. Guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to go plant some turnips, milk my cows, and go talk to my, the townsfolk. So
yeah, it sounds silly describing it. And people who don't know of the game, I'm like, well, you farm. But it's so much more than that. And I just appreciate that one person made the game and did all the art for it and took years and years to make this game. And it's one of the best games I've ever played.
Yeah, it's a pretty sweet game. I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about pets that you've had in your life. Could you share a pet story with us?
Sure. Currently, I have a dog named Tachi. She's a Shiba Inu.
Aw, a Doge.
A Doge, yeah. I love animals. I love reptiles. I had an iguana named Dante after Dante's Peak, the cheesy science movie about volcanoes. My iguana's name was Dante. A fun/funny pet story. I would have to say, when I was in middle school, we had to do some kind of fundraiser. I don't think we had to. It was optional, but I don't know. I was always competitive, and I don't like selling things, but I learned that I would get prizes if I sold so many. I don't know what we were selling. Sausages and cheese. It was like, those weird catalogs they would give you when you were in middle school or elementary school, where you take home and your parents could buy like cheeses and sausages or gift boxes. I don't know, but I was like, I'm going to sell all of this cheese. And I sold enough to get like 3 prizes. And what the prize was is you had to go up in the front of the room of the cafeteria, and there was this box, and you had to, I think you were blindfolded, and the box was like covered, and you had to stick your hand in this box, and inside there was money. There were different types of bills. There were dollar bills, $5 bills, $100 bills, and you got to stick your hand in the box and pull out a bill.
Okay.
And I got to do it 3 times. So I reached my hand in there and I pulled out $1. Yay. There's probably mostly dollars in there. And then I reached my hand in there and I pulled out, I think, a 5 or maybe a 20. I don't remember. It was somewhere in the middle. Okay. And then my last pull, I pulled out $100 bill. And I think I was the only person who did that. But I was in 7th grade. That was a lot of, it's still, $100 is still a lot of money to me.
That's a lot of cheese.
Yeah. Exactly. And I was very excited with this money as a 7th grader. And I told my dad that I wanted to purchase a parrot with my money. Okay. And he was like, okay, Laci, okay. And I decided that I wanted a green Quaker parrot. Or maybe, I don't know. There weren't a lot of options in Indiana. And it was, somebody who raised parrots, and they were kind of close to our house, I guess. But we found them and we went and visited. And my dad let me spend this weird fundraising money on a parrot. And I got the Quaker parrot and I named him Thunder. And he was my buddy.
Oh my goodness. That is the greatest story. That is an amazing pet story.
like, how did you get this bird? Well, let me tell you.
I sold so much cheese.
So much cheese.
Everybody is constipated. That's how much cheese I sold.
Yeah, I swear I must have sold. I think you had to sell 50 things to get one pull out of the money cardboard box. So I must have sold a lot.
So much cheese and sausage.
I know. I don't even know who I sold it to. I don't have a big family at all. But yeah, so I got Thunder with that.
Good for you. If you're just joining us, we're talking science chat with Dr. Laci Brock, who is a planetary scientist and artist. And we just had the most hilarious story about how she wound up with a parrot from cheese money. I don't know how to make that more succinct.
That's about it. I don't think it can be.
Hello, everybody. The Science Podcast will always be free to download and listen to. You'll never have to worry about paying for it. But we have some amazing ways that you can help us out with running the show. The first one is to think about becoming a patron on Patreon. And we call our patrons now the Paw Pack. There's a whole bunch of awesome perks and different tiers of support. We also have a very detailed and excellent merch store. And if you're listening to this in time, we have pre-orders of the Bunsen 2.0 stuffy that was just adorable. You can check it out. There's also the Beaker stuffy on our store and a whole bunch of comfy clothes. The third thing you can do is give us a good rating. Rate the podcast wherever you're listening to this. We'd love to get a great rating from you. Okay, back to the show. Doc, are you okay with opening the floor to questions for people that maybe want to know more about brown dwarfs or your parrot? Is that cool?
Sure. Yeah, let's do it.
Right. So if, we're at the time of the interview of Spaces Unleashed, where if you would like to ask a question of our guest, you can go ahead. Now, keep in mind, right, this is a wholesome space, and Chris and I do check your profile to see if you're following us. Keep your questions on topic. I think probably our guest is good with most things in space. If you have a question specifically about brown dwarfs, that's the jam going on. But, yeah, so if you would like to request the mic, go ahead and we'll bring you up to ask your question. I think Chris is bringing up Marie. Hello.
Hi, very interesting space as always, and I enjoy your hosting. But Dr. Laci's work is interesting to me as well. Well, this is kind of a nerd question because I remember when you were talking about some classifications and the terms that I forgot already, but I would like to ask about classifications that to the lay person, it sounds as though it's off, because coming from a philosophy of science background, and I'm also working on philosophy of classifications, which is usually in biology, right? Like fish don't exist now. Is there something like that in planetary science? So.
Okay, so I think you're asking maybe how we classify brown dwarfs, or if there's some type of system that exists to distinguish one brown dwarf from another.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm not sure if you're familiar with star classification, but there's a bunch of different letters that they'll give stars. And for example, our sun is a G-type star. And the way that stars are classified is usually by their how luminous they are and different spectral features that they have. So something similar was developed for brown dwarfs. And so the lowest mass stars, you also hear them called M dwarf stars. M dwarf or red dwarf stars are the coolest. Some brown dwarfs fall in that spectral type. So they're called M type brown dwarfs. And then when we started detecting cooler and cooler brown dwarfs, we had to come up with new letters to define them because the spectrum of light that they produced looked a lot different than the M-type brown dwarfs. So they added L, T, and Y. And so brown dwarfs get these spectral types, either M, L, T, or Y. And so M is going to be the warmest brown dwarfs, and Y are the coolest brown dwarfs.
Seriously? I mean, I didn't get all of that, but is there, like, if I Google it, or what should I type? Like, blah, blah, classification. Because in psychiatry, it's nosology. What is it in planetary science, the classification system?
You could just type spectral class, and that will tell you about different classifications for stars. And now, sometimes they don't, if you read a page and they're talking about stellar classification, sometimes the brown dwarfs aren't in there because they're not really stars. And so you might have to add in, brown dwarf spectral class. But that should get you, or just type brown dwarf into Wikipedia, and they also go through the classification on Wikipedia.
Okay. Thanks so much. It's so cool.
No problem. Thanks for your question.
Great question, Marie. Thank you very much. If anybody else would like to ask a question, go ahead and request the mic. We don't have anybody today. Normally, there's like a whole lineup of folks. I have one while we're waiting.
I'm scary. I scared them all away.
You scared them all? I don't know. Your story was hilarious. Maybe people are still laughing from the...
Oh, I'm too funny. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Funny.
The cheese parrot. Do some of our planets in our solar system have weird weather? Like are the clouds on other planets water or different types of gases? I guess that's what I'm asking.
Yeah. So Venus has clouds made of sulfuric acid droplets.
Oh, that's nice.
So yeah, that's pleasant. Let's see. Jupiter has clouds made of essentially household cleaning products. Like I always mix it up. I think it's like ammonium or ammonia, maybe both. Hydrosulfate. I forget. But there are weird clouds on Jupiter as well, and water clouds. Jupiter's a lot cooler. So there are water clouds on Jupiter and other weird things. Mm-hmm. There are clouds on the moon Titan, and Titan has a methane cycle. On Earth, we have a water cycle. Titan has a methane cycle. So there's weather on Titan.
That is bizarre. Do you know, I always ask this because I think all scientists know each other, but they don't. We had Ashley Walker, who studies Titan. She's a scientist on Twitter. I don't know if you know her. She mentioned that it rains methane on Titan, and that is just wild because that's the gas that's natural gas, right? That's the gas that in Canada we heat our homes with, and that's the Bunsen burner gas for us too.
Yeah. Titan is very interesting, and there's a lot of cool atmospheric things to study on Titan.
But your heart is with the brown dwarf.
It is. I also like exoplanets. I think exoplanets are interesting, and you can have weird clouds on exoplanets as well. And that's the thing about brown dwarfs is some of the temperatures of brown dwarfs overlap with temperatures of exoplanets. And so you can have similar clouds on exoplanets. Like, it's raining glass on this exoplanet. Like, that's possible.
Oh my goodness.
Or sand, like molten sand.
What a bad day for it to, can you imagine
every day is a bad day.
Can you imagine the weather? Can you imagine the weather report? Like some guy's in front of that green screen. Okay, it's raining death today. It's 9,000 degrees Celsius and it's hailing glass. So kiss your butt goodbye, everybody. Like,
yeah, I really wanted to do that for a TikTok series. I was going to do a solar system and like exoplanet weather report, but I am really awkward and I don't actually like filming science videos. Like, I'm more comfortable now and I'm better at it, but I get really nervous and I was like, I can't do this unless I've had adult beverages. I'm just not going to do it.
I love it. I believe Kimberly has a question. Kimberly Bond, and then over to Liz.
Hello, Laci. I just want, really no question. What I really want to do is say thank you so much for doing this, because I know me growing up, I was never encouraged to go into these things because it wasn't a girly thing. And so this is really, I enjoyed listening to you because I love all of this. And hearing about the brown dwarfs and things like that, that for me, I've never known any of that information, and that fascinates me. So, I'm really excited to see somebody, a female out there, and I know there's more out there, but I'm excited to see, excited to see that you were encouraged to do this. And that's it.
Thank you so much. That means a lot to me. I honestly think part of it is because my dad raised me, and I mean, he let me ride go-karts and four-wheelers, and I liked fast cars, and I rolled around in the mud, and he never told me no or said play with Barbies. I mean, he just let me naturally gravitate toward what I was interested in, and I always liked science. And it's kind of sad, but it wasn't until I got to college that I realized there was a stigma still today against women in STEM fields. And I never had those issues growing up. Like, I got to do whatever I wanted. And then I got to college, and I was 21 at the time. So I was a little older. I started college when I was 21. And that's when I first realized that I was kind of sometimes I was the only woman in my class, and other times I tried to make friends. I saw some guys behind me in a chemistry class doing math, and I like physics. I'm not I don't love math, but I turned around and I remember asking, well, what math class are you taking? And they were like, you wouldn't know.
Oh,
and I'm
jerky.
I'm like, oh, well, why don't you just tell me? Oh, Calc 2, I've already passed that class. Like, then I was just going to be like mean, because I'm like, you need to check your attitude. And it just, I never grew up with any issues. And then when I got to college, it was totally different.
Thanks for the comment, Kim. Doc, one thing you might find inspiring, or you might like, is after I'm done these chats with scientists like yourself, I talk about you the next day in my classroom. I teach high school chemistry, right? And I'm like, this is who I talked to yesterday. This is Dr. Laci Brock. And I watch the kids' faces, and some of the girls, like, they see a path in science when they see people like you, right? Like, maybe they haven't had that upbringing. And I love showcasing these amazing scientists that come on our spaces. And I think it's really important, even for the boys. They're like, okay, cool. It's this amazing scientist, right? So,
that's great. Yeah. I think every little bit helps. I didn't know any scientists at all, but I did grow up with this picture in my mind of what a scientist was. And I always pictured like some proper person with no tattoos, no piercings, like business casual always. And that's what I thought a scientist was. Like, it was really fun when I went to my first conference, and I have some tattoos, and I was kind of nervous that I was going to stand out. And I remember asking during the undergrad portion of the conference, it was my first science conference, and I asked if I was allowed to have tattoos.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I didn't know anything. And so I learned more, and I realized, well, hey, scientists, scientists don't always wear business casual. So that's what I learned.
No.
Or lab coats. They don't always wear lab coats.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I don't know if there's some scientists that would ever wear a lab coat because their stuff doesn't require that type of clothing.
There's a great meme of a guy in a lab coat standing next to a telescope, and somebody's like,
What's he doing?
Where's space? And it's like this weird stock photo, and he's pointing to the sky, and he's like, and it says, space astronomer, can you tell me where space is? He's like, there is space. It's just like the funniest thing ever.
Why the heck does he have a lab coat on? That's the funniest thing. Like,
I don't know. It's some weird stock photo, but I have it saved in my desktop on every computer, and it always makes me laugh.
I'm going to look for that. I'm going to post it in one of the threads to this space.
It's so funny. I don't know the story, but that's okay.
Oh, those stock chemistry ones are the worst. Like they're always like looking at obviously weirdly dyed chemicals in pieces of glassware that have no way to measure them properly, and sometimes they don't have their eyeglasses on the right way or their PPE, and I'm like, what are these people doing? Like, anyway.
It's so funny.
Anyways, over to Liz. Go ahead.
Well, good evening, Doc. Big congrats to finishing a PhD. It is quite a journey. So I'm coming in here with the ignorance. I can always ask the stupid questions. I don't mind. Maybe I missed it. I was listening, but I'm grading at the same time. Did you say it precipitates gemstone somewhere?
Yes, it is possible that on these brown dwarfs, because the clouds are made up of different types of condensates than water, it is possible that if it were to storm and this particular cloud was composed of iron, it would rain liquid iron on your face. Or I guess if it's, hailing or solidifying, then, it could be a little pieces of iron dust. Or if the cloud is made up of corundum and instatite, it could be rubies, sapphires, peridot, hail, or rain. Yes, it's definitely possible.
Well, I guess I'll take the rain we're having outside over that. And then my next question, and again, apologies if you already talked about, what the heck is a brown dwarf?
Oh, where have you been? We've been talking about brown dwarfs for 30 minutes. A brown dwarf, just in a quick, I have ADHD, so I completely understand. I've said a lot about them, but the big takeaway is it's not a planet and it's not a star. It's sort of an in-between.
Okay.
It's like a
more
spork.
massive than Jupiter. Yeah, it's like a spork. Yeah, if we had to assign a utensil to a brown dwarf, it would be a spork. It has properties because, you've got a spoon and a fork. Okay, so spoons are planets and forks are stars. And brown dwarfs are sporks because they have properties of both planets and stars. Either that cleared it up or I just confused you more.
No. You have to tailor what you're talking about to your audience, and the more ridiculous the example, the more the students remember it. So thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, they're basically in between planets and stars, and they're more massive than planets, but less massive than stars. And because they're not as hot as stars, you can have clouds in their atmospheres. You can think of them like chunky Jupiters, I guess, if you want a visual.
I love that. Chunky Jupiters.
Yeah, so they're going...
They got junk in the trunk.
Yeah, they're more massive than Jupiter, and their clouds are different. They could have banding. We've learned with some research that they could also have banding like Jupiter. So a chunky Jupiter. Sure.
I feel like you need to do a painting of that.
Oh, I have one next to me, actually. I have like a chunky, weird colored Jupiter. I don't know if it's a brown dwarf or a planet. I don't know what I painted. I just kind of went with it.
So Chris, my co-host behind the scenes, found that meme, Doc, and it's now up in the nest. So people can take a look at the, hey, space astronomer, where is space? He's pointing to space. So.
Oh my God, it's so funny.
So there you go, everybody.
He may need those safety goggles if he's going to get iron on his face.
Seriously.
I don't know if that's going to help. That's some pretty heavy metal. Marie, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I'm still giggling with a spork metaphor. It's brilliant. But related to you mentioned something about exoplanets, and this is rekindling my interest in space. But I haven't done that in ages. I'm mostly in psycholinguistics, philosophy of science, cognitive science now. But is it right, if I recall correctly, are exoplanets planets that are Earth-like, that are potentially habitable to us, but are far away? Is that it? Sorry if it's
Exoplanets does include Earth-like planets, but it's actually a broader category than that. An exoplanet is any planet that's not in our solar system.
Oh, okay. Okay, cool. Thank you.
No problem.
I love it. Doc, do you have time for one more question?
Sure.
Okay, so we'll go to Paula, and then we'll wrap up. Go ahead, Paula.
Okay. Hi, good evening, everybody. Hi, Dr. Laci. How are you? It's nice to talk to you, and you've I just love your enthusiasm. I just have two quick questions. What's your favorite medium to paint in? And do you still have your parrot?
Okay, I have the happy news and the sad news. I love painting in oils. That is my favorite. I'm kind of lazy sometimes, and I don't want to set up my oils, so I'll just paint in watercolors or digitally. But if I had to pick, oils. And then the sad part, I don't have my parrot anymore. My parrot passed away, and it's a sad story, but
I'm sorry.
It's okay. It happened a long time ago, but he was a good parrot, and he didn't suffer, and I'll always remember him and the cheese I had to sell to get him.
Well, it's a fascinating story, and I'm sure parrots are so cool, and it's just an endearing story. So I don't know if it was like when you have kids and you have fundraisers, you must have sold a lot of Pepperidge Farm or something. So hats off to you. But that's great. But thanks, and your art is beautiful, because I do a little digital work, and it's just beautiful. I just love your watercolors and everything.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Okay, I think we're at the end. Dr. Brock, thank you so much for joining us tonight in Science Chat. I hope I wasn't too silly. I was having so much fun. This was so interesting and enjoyable. Thank you so much for being our guest tonight.
Thank you so much for having me. I hope that I wasn't too silly and that I answered questions and actually helped people understand brown dwarfs better.
I think science needs a good mix of silly and serious, and I think we hit a very good happy medium / sporkiness of the both. So.
Yes. Brown, I'll take that away from tonight. Brown dwarfs are sporks. But thank you so much for having me. And thank you, everyone out there, for joining and for your questions. I really appreciate it.
And you, of course, make sure everybody follows Dr. Brock. I mean, you just have to click on her profile picture and give her a follow as well. I believe we were talking earlier, Stellar Arts is your handle on Insta and TikTok as well.
Yep, it's the same as it is here. It's Stellar Arts with an E in stellar, like the bird, Stellar's J.
Gotcha. We didn't even get to talk about bird watching, but you know what? We did a whole big interview for the Science Podcast. So if you want more Dr. Brock, that'll be coming out in a couple months. So there's the full interview where we got to also talk about bird watching.
Yay!
Okay, take care. I'm just going to wrap up the space now. All right. Thanks so much to our guest, the amazing Dr. Laci Brock, planetary scientist and artist and supreme cheese seller. I'm not sure, but it was so much fun. Great stories, great knowledge about brown dwarfs. Chris, we've been so busy today. Do you have anything to add before we shut down?
No, just thank everybody. I'd like to thank everybody for coming and for sharing in our passion about communicating science. And Dr. Laci definitely brought her passion to the forefront, and we really appreciate that. Thank you.
Our other space is Saturday at 6 p.m. It's Pet Chat, totally wholesome. We'll share stories about Bunsen and Beaker. We play a game, somebody wins a prize. And of course, you get to share your pet story or listen to other people share the stories about their pets. That's Pet Chat this Saturday, 6 p.m. Next week in Science Chat, oh man, it is unbelievable, Chris. We have scientists booked all the way to June. We have next week Dr. Zazie Todd, who's an animal behaviorist and has written 2 books. One is called WAG. She was on the Science Podcast last season. So we're going to talk about all things dog science. I'm so excited about that. Dog science. Woohoo! All right, I think that's it. Take care, everybody. Oh, thanks again, Dr. Brock.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. All right, everybody, take care. For science, empathy, and cuteness. Space ending in 3,